The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Welcome to the fourth and last session of our business transformation series. Today, talking about empowering end users. My name is Ariella Shoham. I head our marketing, and I will be your moderator. I will be answering questions that you should feel free to address to us through the questions dialog box on your GoToWebinar panel. And our presenter today is Dale Hopkinson, who is Senior Director of our product management. Over to you, Dale.
Thanks, Ariella. Yep. Hi everyone. Once again, for joining this session. So as Ariella mentioned, this is the last of this business transformation piece as we're focused on this year. So we're talking about empowering the end user. So we're going to go through and really talk more from a customer perspective, right? As far as how do you allow your customers in a self-service manner to kind of take control of this, their licensing and their assets as you've turned it over to them, and really kind of walk through, in a sense, some of those things we've helped our customers with and those burdens we see that you may have, and kind of help you along that path there. All right, so as an agenda item, we'll kind of walk through why customer experience is critical. We'll look at, we picked out one of the customer success stories that we have had. Kind of go through again the challenges to self-service, why some customers have problems there, and how to help you get over that, and walk through the most common use cases. We find in working with customers, there's a common set of use cases where low-hanging fruit, essentially, right? So the things where you may be bogging down your technical support department, or the number one burdens on end customers, right? So we'll kind of walk through that and give you some ideas. We'll give you our approach and how we help to solve that, and of course look at some key takeaways. So as always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to type it in the chat window or the Q&A window. As we either go through the presentation or towards the end, we'll get a chance to kind of touch upon your question, give you an answer. And if it's something more in depth, we have no problem as always connecting with you after to give you better, insights into your unique situation. So once again, thanks for joining, and let's get started. So a slide that, I see a few names who've been joining since the beginning. Thanks for coming back, I suppose. Maybe we're doing something that a little bit good. So of course, not a new slide, right? We've been talking from the beginning, about the whole transformation and just shifting in the market, people moving to more revenue and subscription based and focus on revenue growth. And why I introduced this slide is, when you introduce different business models, of course, there's some things that has to change, right? And again, from the pure subscription and consumption model, we know that it's either on everyone is implementing that, or it's on the radar as a sort of a next, or next action to do, right? Tons of benefits around subscription, whether it's on the revenue side or the competitive side. But one of the things we've uncovered with analysts and a lot of customers that we have helped through that process is when you shift to subscription, you really have to begin to focus now on the long-term relationship of that customer, right? So it becomes now, how do you retain that customer, and what programs and processes you put in place for customer retention, and anything around customer retention where the customer has a decision if to renew an agreement or a subscription with you. Their previous experience with, with the service or with the company, it plays heavily in part in that decision, right? So that's the kind of piece we want to talk about today, is how, helping you not just turn over good customer experience, but in the sort of the problem set of helping you to establish long-term relationships by your customer experience. So why is that critical? So again, you may have seen this information before, but just to reiterate, when you shift the approach in a subscription economy, as it's commonly called by many of the analysts, when you move from product-centric to service-centric, there's by nature the strategy change from being focused on the product and more focused on the customer, right? What does a customer need? When does a customer need deliveries? If you're moving to service-based, do you need to do things like monthly service pack releases versus the sort of the quarterly minor release, right? So you have to look at those different things based on a customer, not just what you want to do from the technology standpoint. The key thing I want to really focus here today is on the value proposition. When you focus more on product centric and the traditional business models, the perpetual, standalone, etc., it's really about differentiating with innovative technology, right? Someone will buy and pay a perpetual license or a large sum for your technology if it's innovative, if it's different, from competition, if it affords them, a easier way to do something. But when you're more in that service-centric or subscription-centric kind of model, you really begin to focus more on the customer experience. Because again, opposed to the revenue model where you have that transactional value, now the real value is about recurring, right? So if you look, of course, you can see Adobe, right? They, and even Microsoft, they have really good earning seasons now, right? Why? Because they see a lot of their recurring revenue models are up, and of course there are tons of benefits to that, from the analyst and business side. But when you begin to look at the subscription, um, renewing that agreement with the customer becomes very, very critical. So you begin to focus there on what that customer experience is, before, during, and after they've had your product or service, and likes to implement, re-implement or renew the contract with you. So of course, again, wouldn't go through this, word for word, but the value of customer experience is not just me saying it, right? I mean, this is well known in the industry. Anyone who's doing subscription-based, consumption-based, metering pricing, it really is about the value that you derive from the experience of the company. I mean, think about it, right? Where if you have to, even today in a rudimentary example, you have your traditional cable and phone service provider, and now you have the opportunity at a Netflix or the whole cutting the cord program in the States, right? Most of those, while they give access to better content, you have a better experience, right? You have better control of what tier you want to be in, or what level of content you have versus what you pay, etc. So many different ways to offer unique experience. Of course, that's just a very rudimentary example. But here's also why it's critical. From your customer's perspective, your customer almost expects these core things, right? So when we Gemalto, when we engage with prospects and customers looking to do different things with us, we usually uncover these four core buckets. Their customers, so also your customers, they've been exposed to some level of flexible pricing, and they like that, right? They want to be able to purchase what they pay for, or get into some tier that's closely aligned to features and functionalities and service that they need, opposed to buying everything because it's a perpetual model and they get access to everything, maybe not using everything. Another thing that customers like, your customers like, we uncover is the delivery of software, near to the as close as you can to the point of demand, deliver something. That just increases user experience. There again, think of a rudimentary example with ride sharing, right? As quicker as when you dial the ride up on your app, the faster that app the ride comes, you're happy. Sometimes I was in California a while ago, and I dialed up one of the ride shares, and 10 minutes. I'm like, what do you mean 10 minutes, right? I'm accustomed to being like 3 and 5 minutes, and I had to remind myself of, user experience of that's still normal. It's still better than maybe a taxi, right? But we're so accustomed to that instant delivery. Same thing with software and services. If you're not doing electronic software delivery yet, maybe that's something to talk to us about. We have tons of data and we can help there. But a lot of customers, they almost expect after they purchase, they can download or they receive access to the software and level of functionality they purchase from you. Same with service. It's very uncommon today, if you sign up for a SaaS service, you don't get access immediately. So customers, they almost expect that. They expect a smooth user experience, right? User experience here is driving a number of things. I mean, from the way you pay your bills, to the way you have access to data in your house, even your car. So software, of course, they expect this consistent and repeatable user experience, right? So from our world, that would come down to how that customer is obtaining or receiving your software. How do they install? How do they provision? How do they activate and get the license, etc., etc. Right? If they need to meet a use case like moving from one device or one environment to another, are those things smooth? Right? Then ultimately, I'm sort of moving on as customers, they desire to understand how are they actually using their software? That comes more into play around consumption and subscription-based models, because they want to be able to understand, what is the best tier for them to purchase from you, right? So if you subscription, you have, typical gold, bronze, silver kind of methodology. Uh, Prospect or customer wants to identify where's the best place I fall in, and I may have my thought about it, but if you can give me insight and data into the best tier, that's also ultimately a negotiation, tool that you can use to help retain that customer. You can identify with them, even if it's a lesser tier, they're more likely to stay with you, and you're still recognizing revenue opposed to them moving to another competitor of yours. So these are the four core things as from the eyes of your customers. As we've learned, these are the things they kind of expect when they acquire and procure software. So to kind of give you an example of that, where this whole customer experience fits in, and all those four things I just mentioned before, I want to kind of walk you through what we call one of our use cases for one of these companies that we've done a similar project with, HP. So just at a nutshell, so HP, they already had an existing entitlement and licensing solution, but it wasn't affording them a user experience that they really liked, right? They wanted to be able to, of course, HP, they have a number. This is before they split also a few years ago. So there was a number of products, of course, that HP sold. And if you were, let's say you were company A, right? So you were company A and you brought product 1 and product 2 from HP. Each of those individual products, you had a totally different experience from how you purchase that product, to how you receive that product, to how you activate and install, and how you manage the license and the entitlement on that product. So of course, if you look at the many iterations of products that HP had, this for them, they wanted to streamline and have a consistent and repeatable user experience. And from the HP standpoint, they actually had further metrics that tied to revenue based on their user experience. They were pretty, they ranked themselves in pretty low in their space. So that drove their project. So just from the Gemalto sort of solution. So at a glance, so they had multiple license technologies. They wanted to have a single interface or a single system of record for those license technologies, and that was our system, our entitlement management. Day one, they had a ton of data to migrate rather, because of course they had existing technology. So, we work with a number of companies who they have existing technologies, and we migrate. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to switch license technology, but we can give from the operational standpoint, a consistent experience, which leads itself now to a consistent end customer experience. So of course we went through I wouldn't go through all the project details, but we went through the project with HP. And what's nice is we actually had these are real live HP metrics. A lot of times we do these projects and we just say, yeah, things are much better. But again, since HP had some initiatives tied to revenue and tracked by up from their executive team, so they shared with us some of these metrics that's of course public. But within just a few months of deployment of go live, right, there was an increase in customer satisfaction as well as a decrease in customer dissatisfaction. So again, to HP, they directly tied this metric into some additional revenue from their customers and not just their experience. So they're also their brand, sort of the brand awareness and brand scoring were increased. They tied some things there, but more importantly, these two metrics were tied to revenue. Again, a lot of times most companies don't go so far to tie customer satisfaction to recurring revenue. Again, if you think about the previous few slides that I just showed, where you begin to change now the strategy from being product centric to more customer focus, you have to really begin to think about these renewal, because that's tied directly to revenue. So again, this is a nice quote from HP, and again, just sharing with us, kind of how we help them more specifically into this particular project. And again, they're using our technology, but you can see in this images on the right, it's definitely HP user experience, right? So regardless of the technology that you use underlying, whether it's Gemalto or homegrown technology, you want to make sure you're passing off an experience that's consistent with other parts of your business. So let's look at this, right? So what are some of the challenges that you may be facing or our customers face when it comes to self-service, right? Or giving your customers or your end users more autonomy in regards to their license. So of course, some of them you have from the operational standpoint, the operational challenges, right? Sometimes these can become roadblocks. and have definitely impact on a business. So we look at some of the challenges are based off really and slow delivery, right? So if you have a mechanism by where things are not integrated internally, where maybe your entitlement or license generation is not integrated to your ordering, then there's definitely a disconnect, which means now there has to be some level of manual entry from the ERP sales order to your license generator, and then you would grab the license and possibly update the ERP with installed base records. So with those manual process, it's slow delivery. That's also an inconsistent operational user experience internally, as well as an inconsistent end user experience. Each one of those are going to be different times, different input may be needed, a different process, right? There's no streamline, no operational automation of that process. And that ultimately leads to a lack of self-service. We have many customers who they're in that particular, this particular process that they do things manually. The only self-service item really is usually an email where you ask a customer to send some kind of identifying information of their system that you need that you can generate that license, right? So if that is, again, it's slow delivery, right? And for those who still may ship the dongles, again, you have to think about shipping time, et cetera, et cetera. If you're shipping to countries with that may be looking at as customs, they need to look at the the certificate of origin, etc. And these are all time factors that lead ultimately to a customer dissatisfaction. And again, the same shipping with hardware, or even how you deliver your software, it may be a revenue recognition slowdown, right? Again, you can't recognize revenue until you have given customer everything they need to utilize the software. So in the case you're doing a manual delivery, as the first step outline, you have to wait till you've proven you've shipped and everything has been received from your customer to recognize revenue. I'm actually working with a proof of concept right now with a company where their operationals team, they have 5 people who do licensing. 5 people who do licensing. Now, they were not brought on initially to do licensing full time, but that's just the needs of the business because they have a very manual process. Now they're in the process of looking at automating things internally for the operation standpoint, but also offering a clean user experience where the user has some autonomy to redeem the license and to do some amount of things. Of course, that leads itself into a large TCO, right? I mean, when you have a larger number of headcount and more people focusing on licensing, that should be people who have to build things and maintain things from the IT standpoint, that increases your TCO from the standpoint. And then ultimately, if you look at, depending on if you're not streamlining for the point where your users can interact with the system, you miss a lot of data there, right? And you can't use that data to make different and even sometimes better decisions. So these are some of the three rather core operational challenges as we see here, and of course, sort of just laying out the kind of things that we walk through with our prospects as we engage with them. Sort of focusing more to the software monetization level of challenges. These are things we see again, right? So there's manual processes, right? That usually depends on internal knowledge, right? And what I mean by that is if your licensed technology, whether it's third party or homegrown, there usually is one person or a few people who are responsible or even know how to generate the license. You get whatever input is required and they spit out for your license that you can send to your customer. And of course, once you send it to your customer, life as well. But if that person is on vacation or something happens to them in an emergency situation and they're not accessible, that becomes a little bit difficult to do, right? You have a hiccup in that process. Why? Because you're really depending on a few people who know what to do, opposed to an automated system that will give you the same result every single time. Of course, that takes place and that becomes even more pervasive when you have multiple systems. If you've grown through acquisitions or if you've moved from one licensing technology or one vendor from another, you may be maintaining existing technology that, again, only a few people know. And that gives you a lack of insight when you want to track and see, how many people are on particular versions or have a particular license. You don't have the real insight into that. It's just an inflexible infrastructure that really cannot scale to help you solve the business needs as you would need to. So in this section, I want to kind of walk you through now some of the use cases, more or less, as we kind of solve with our customers. So we pick it up from the problem set of what they have with the manual process, and kind of walking through what is usually implemented to help and give more autonomy to the end customers and to help them out. So these are kind of 6 use cases I'll cover. So again, these there usually is more, but these are the core ones. 80-90% of the customers and prospects we engage with, they have some level of use case like this, and ideally use well on the phone as well. So usually there's some kind of environment where if you can simplify the activation process, and by activation I mean the redemption of the license, how the customer redeems that license. So you can think of this as during the onboard or provisioning process or installation. We have a number of companies and customers we work with where they want to streamline this and they want to drive that in a self-service manner, but they want to do it through the actual application UI, right? So think of the traditional Microsoft activation. If you install any kind of Microsoft product, please enter your product code or product key, that kind of process. Then we have another subset of customers, and usually the same customer. They have another use case where they may not install or deploy in an environment that has internet connectivity, but they still want to be able to allow their customer to their end user to do self-service, right? They don't want that end user to have to call them to say, hey, I need my license, please help me. They still want to allow that autonomy. We have a lot of customers now that we work with that they're moving into cloud licensing, right, where they want to be able to actually collect more telemetry data and understand either they want to switch to consumption-based pricing, or they just want to understand from the pure BI, the business intelligence level, how is their application, how is their service being used, right? Software downloads, again, that instantaneous delivery. Most companies, they decide, is there a way to enforce, who can download what versions, etc., based on their level of service or entitlement that they have. And it's nice, when you give a single landing page to your customers that they can go and manage all of the things that they've purchased from you. They've downloaded their allowable software and content, as well as, if you even further in future, this single landing page can potentially allow them to open support tickets and check the knowledge base, as well as buy more stuff, right? So those are the kinds of projects we're working on. Trial and extensions, right? How can you make, if you want to allow your customers to extend their evaluation period, can they do something like that without calling you, or the process you have, can that scale? And then the whole deactivation, the RMA process of moving something from one environment to another, whether both environments are up at the same time, or you need to RMA some existing features. So again, in a very, very short, nutshell, kind of walk through, in a format like this, what the typical business scenario is, what the desired user experience is, and then kind of, what we implement or how we help companies get there. Right. So of course, as I mentioned, most of you on the phone, I have some use case like this, or you should have some use case like this, where your customer orders something new, right? New software or new license, and the customer has internet access on the system or in the environment where the software is running. Now, whether they can connect, all the time, that's a different question. But as long as they can connect to the internet one time during provision install time, that's all that's needed. So here's the usually desired customer experience. You want to make a workflow that is 100% self-service, no intervention from you as a software provider, right? Allow the customer to know, upon ordering, right, what the process is going to be. Are they going to receive something automatically, or sort of setting the expectation? And then once they have the actual software, doing that activation through the software, not anything external causing them to, to have to learn or use a new tool. And then likewise, you have sort of the activation in a portal, right? So I kind of walk through those from a use case standpoint and what we plug in. But from a portal, again, so allowing the customer to redeem their license in a self-service manner, even though they may not have internet connection. So again, similar desired user experience to make it self-service. The customer, can get their license and they're notified. All right, so here's kind of what we eventually walk through with a customer from the portal side, and I can just talk through the activation from the product, from your application UI. Right. But again, from a deployment standpoint, usually there's some level of customer portal that has to be in place. The nice thing is I'll talk through a bit more in depth when I get to more of the Gemalto Technologies standpoint, is whether you need a portal from us, or you have your own existing portal, or you have, maybe you have a service provider who builds portals for you, all of that's fine from our standpoint. We can support either one of those. Right? We have underlying technology that can sort of plug in anywhere to give you the appropriate level of data to allow you to drive a user experience that you have crafted and you want to pass off as your own. So in this kind of workflow, typical, of course, in the step one, you process the order, as you would normally do, and then order creates an entitlement, which is the right to use or the right to redeem a license. And somehow that customer or that purchaser is notified of purchase is complete, and here you have now access to this portal. So again, the details I've obscured because what that access entails. Is that a username, password? Is that an existing credential? Those are all things we can support, and those are all the details we dig into, of course, to get to a more simplified view as I have on the screen here today. So the customer now would receive all of those credentials. Now this portal, the customer would log into this portal with their credentials. And I probably should have put a bigger image, but from this is just a representation of what our portal can look like if you wanted it to. But again, you have full control of the user experience, or you should have full control of a user experience regardless of what technology we implement. So customer logs into the portal, then at a glance they get access to their stuff, right? So they can look at their purchase that they just made, whether you want to give them access only to that direct purchase, so they can just simply streamline, download, and activate, or they get a view into look at all of their existing purchases, right? So they can go back and see the history of that, right? So many other things, of course, you can do with the portal, but for right now, we're just talking about the simple use case as far as where I've installed your software. I cannot access the internet, but I can still self-service, right? I can go to a portal. I can enter some credential that you want to identify my install device or machine as, and this portal gives me a license where now I am responsible to bring to walk the license in, sneaking it on use cases just based on this, right? So this is one of those low-hanging fruits. If you can simplify this process, get a lot of efficiency gains, and increase your customer experience. So while I didn't have a diagram from the application standpoint, I can just go back 2 slides. But similar process as the majority of people are accustomed to today. So you launch, you install the software, and at some point in time, something pops up that says, hey, please enter your activation code, right? So again, from the activation code standpoint, our technology would give you the activation code. Before a license is now installed automatically. But that's an automated process whereby the only input from your user is simply enter you have to process something before you give them access. The typical business scenario is you as a vendor, you want to give software with entitled products, right? So once someone is entitled, once they made a purchase, and you can verify that, you want to be able to give them, again, 100% customer self-service access. You don't want to have them calling again support to know where's the new version, or where's the version I'm allowed, or the patch or the update, etc. They should get a view into that where they can go ahead and they can access their content, right? And again, that's controlled through portal, the presentation layer. But depending on how you wanted to do it, we have some companies that we work with where they give access to all of their software to download. And for them, that's fine because you can only use the software now if you have a valid license or valid entitlement. And then we have some companies we work with where they actually want to limit what you can download based off what you've purchased. Again, from our standpoint, we can solve and go both ways. But here's sort of an insight into what that customer experience looks or can look like, right? So again, same existing portal I just showed on the previous slide. Again, rudimentary layout, all of that, the cosmetics, the TV time stuff, you have control, or any portal you use, you want to make sure you have control of the experience to pass it off as your own. So common workflow is, of course, either company comes in and they can go ahead and they can see what they've purchased, right? They can see some level of information, the available quantity. They can look things up by existing order number, order dates, etc., part numbers they've ordered, product names, right? So we'll have to think about what's the best logical layout for your customers, your end customers, and we can work with you and give you insight into that if you need to. But more importantly, if you look at it in sort of letter B on the bottom half of the page, right? So again, in this scenario, the person who logged in, they are entitled to this particular order number 098765, right? So this has an end date, well in the future. So they have two things they can download, right? So we're actually doing entitlement-driven download. So if you're allowed to download this product, you can only download it. So the purpose of why you may want to think about doing so, two things. One, for the user experience, again, is clean and clear, right? The download is tied to their order number, and any line item they purchase that has a separate downloadable content, they have access to that. Now, of course, if you want to have also documentation, etc., you can build that presentation to the customer in such a way where it's concise and they know exactly where everything is. One of the things why we always suggest at least initially you do what we call entitlement driven downloads, and again that just simply means that if you have a valid order number, right, you've purchased something, that's the only time you can download. If you have a CDN provider, a content distribution network, Akamai or Amazon or one of the other players, they usually charge you every time bits are transferred, right? So anytime someone downloads something, that usually builds up your usage charge. So if you're preventing someone who is not allowed to download by a valid entitlement, right, that can help save you on your own internal costs, right? You're validating that only those people who will download are those who should download, right? So that's just the premise there. Again, if you need to support, and you don't want to sort of enforce who is downloading what based off entitlement, perfectly fine. You can also take that same method and tie that to maintenance updates, right? So you can give allowable updates, based on, again, service agreement or contracts, etc. And those are the things usually, again, at increased support calls, right? Someone is calling to know where's the latest version on the website, how can I download it, right, etc., etc. Another one of the use cases we typically see is sort of that license deactivation and the RMA. So activation in reverse, right? So the business scenario is customer wants to move your software from one device or one machine to another, if you allow it, of course. So that usually entails that the valid license in that environment has to be so quote unquote deactivated, right? You want to verify that they're not just copying the license and give them 2 copies of your software for the price of 1. You want to be able to do that, or if it's putting back into an entitlement pool, move to another system, or hardware RMA, etc. A few different use cases. These are the common ones that sort of fall under this deactivation process. So again, from your customer experience, right, they want to be able to do, if you think about the activation, however they have activated your product, this process should be the exact process, but in reverse. So if they did that activation in sort of that one-click manner from the application where they had internet connection, that should be the same way for the deactivation. They should be able to go from the existing device and click a button that says, rehost my, or whatever you call it, right? Revoke my license, move my license, or something like that, right? So that process should be done internet automatically for them. Or if it's via a portal, again, they have the same manual step where they go to the portal and say, I'm removing my license. There's a verification, and then they can go now to a different device to sort of activate. Right. So again, sort of what that would or could look like from more of the licensing standpoint of. Oh, I didn't move the slide. Now from the user perspective, right? So again, the automated way, right? I showed the portal for the other workflow, show the automated way for this workflow. So customers can go ahead and via that, again, that same screen, you have maybe some functionality in the application that says, remove or revoke, rehost, however you would call it, deactivate the license, right, for whatever purpose. So you allow that to be driven by the customer. The customer can deactivate, and again, the premise is there. Your license technology will do one of 2 things. Either your actual license technology will verify that the license is really deleted and sort of deactivated on device A before allowing to move to device B. Or if you operate in more of a trust-based model, that's certainly fine, where you sort of deactivate, but there's no real verification the license is gone. Again, those can meet a number of use cases. We see both, but the most important thing is to make that autonomous for the user. So the vendors, you should be able to, in terms of our own technology, right? You're able to allow that customer to drive that action. Or it could be, we have sometimes where the initial request is you have to allow that customer to perform the action, where they may have to send an email or get a verification that you say, yep, you're allowed to do it. But once they're allowed, driving of that actual action, you can do it from the customer perspective and not necessarily getting your technical support team involved. So I want to talk about a little bit of the Gemalto side, right? From the technology piece, how we help customers really accomplish those use cases, more from our solution set. So again, our solution, Sentinel soft monetization. We do entitlement management, which focuses on more of the back office functionalities, right? So creating an entitlement and mapping your entitlement to your saleable licensable sellable items, right? The license generation, if you need to tie that in a streamline to any kind of back office system, ERP, CRM, billing, etc., we can do that. And of course, we also have Sentinel enforcement. Those are the bits and pieces that goes into your application, that when your application is running, it checks the license and validates that the application should run and not being cloned, etc., etc. So more from an ecosystem standpoint, again, we understand that our solution is really part of an ecosystem, kind of where we fit, right? So if you look at the Sentinel software and services ecosystem, again, as I mentioned, Sentinel EMS is, you can think of it as the hub, right? So it's more of the brains of the piece. Here's where you can support multiple licensed technologies, right? So if we think back with the previous few slides, the HP example, they had many different licensed technologies, and changing licensed technology sometimes is not feasible, because that means you have to introduce something to the install base, and that may be too disruptive, right? But you want a single system internally where you can produce many licensed generators, or many different types of license from different technologies. But that will give you the opportunity now to drive the same exact experience for your customers. So regardless of the license technology, you'll produce that license the same way from the operational standpoint. You'll deliver it the same way to the customer, and you'll have the customer interact with that license technology the same way, because you're based off a centralized entitlement system, in this case EMS. So you can see EMS, we have the technology in mind where it can be integrated and automated, right? So integrated into any back office systems, whether it's ERP, CRM. We have some connectors, but EMS is based off REST web services, where you can do the work yourself, or we can help. Then we have also our secure license technology, where regardless of the platform or the environment you deploy on, whether it's a traditional device or environment, desktop-based software, you have intelligent devices, mobile devices, restricted footprint devices, cloud applications. We have technology that can fit and support in all of those different deployment models and environments, right? Again, feeding back into the same back office system. So if you're integrated, you get a single insight, a single system of record for all entitlement data, for all activation data, as well as usage if you're collecting any usage from those pieces there. We also support, again, web portals, right? It's part of the ecosystem. So you'll see, I have a few snapshots of some of the portals we support. But what's more nice is we have a number of customers who they have maybe their own existing portal, and they just want to do an integration, right? So they can abstract some data and present to the user. So we certainly do that. So we look at, again, from a portal standpoint, so we have customer portals where we focus on probably that core 80% use case, where the primary responsibility is allowing customer to do the common action that's self-service. And as I mentioned a number of times, this is focused on reducing support calls, right? So if you look, the few use cases I showed before, activation, deactivation, that /RMA process, right? Those are the core things where users call in and say, hey, I need help with a license functionality. So by reducing that and making it self-service, your customers now have the ability to drive that without making an abundance of support tickets. From your perspective, this portal I'm displaying, you saw this look and feel through a few slides, but these are fully customizable, right? Whether you want to change the workflow, the UI, the colors, look and feel, etc., we'll turn the source code over to you. Then in a view, when you back to your customer, you give them access to some level of portal. You always want to give them access to all of the stuff they've purchased, right? So they can view all of their entitlements, and they can maybe look at quantities and see how their stuff is being used, where it's installed, etc. Right? You want to also allow I showed the other side to be able to download from the same portal, right? So think about, you're going to give one landing page where customers can go. They can do everything pertaining to soft monetization. They can access their downloadable content. They can also get their license. They can, do some level of asset management, right? In a sense, right? They're managing their software and their entitlements. So one thing I didn't touch too much on is, not just supporting your customers in a self-service manner, but your partners in a self-service manner, right? So you want to be able to allow, for those who sell through, different distribution channels, you want to be able to allow your partners also a level of autonomy, right? And this will depend based on the relationship. But at a minimum, you want to give your partners the ability to manage on behalf of their customers' entitlements, right? You want to give them a view into what they've purchased themselves, or what you have allocated to them, in a sense, right? They get a cross-customer view. So of course they can reassign and allocate any entitlement that you may be assigned to them, to their own customers, and if needed, they can also do license activations or deactivations on behalf of their customers. So giving them insight into that also is also very valuable. Right? So in a sense, we're again looking at this not just self-service from the end customer perspective, but how you can also serve your distribution partners in that manner as well. Right? So again, in a nutshell, we kind of looked at those 6 core use cases again, right? What makes that critical to really provide? And again, there are more, but those are the 6 core ones that will immediately increase your user experience, as well as drive down support calls, right? So activation via the product, activation via web portal, cloud licensing, and usage, collection if you're collecting usage and making that seamless, software downloads, extending trials and evaluations, and then deactivating and sort of the RMA, right? So I just want to walk through to just sort of whet the appetite, so to say, around customer experience and how you would drive that and what you can look at solving if you're not doing some of those things today. So if there's any Q&A at this time, we can sort of go through some of the questions and answers that we may have. So I know one common question while I'm looking at some of the other questions. One common question is that usually comes up is around timing and that, right? So how long does it take, right? If you want to solve some of these things or get a portal into place, how long does that take? So I'll just jump on that one initially. So before someone asks, and if we need to, we can talk more specifically about user experience. So that depends, of course, on use case, right? But I've seen integrations where it's taken 1 quarter, it's taken 3 quarters, right? So that kind of depends on what you're doing with your portal. If the portal is only focused on entitlement pieces, or if you want to integrate, portal that you have for purchasing and tech support and other functionalities like that, that of course would take longer. So that depends on scope, but I would say commonly is between 1 to 3 quarters. So I see another question here around ESD, right? Do you can you use FTP? That's fine, right? So I guess the heart of the question really is, can you have your own content provider? That's certainly fine. We support both, right? We have an option where we leverage out of the box AWS as a CDN network. We find that comparable and even some places better suited for software delivery. So you can look at us from a full sort of end-to-end solution there from the SD side, or you can have your own and implement with EMS. So that's certainly fine from our standpoint.
you see any more, Dale?
No, none that's relevant for this discussion. There's some that's probably a bit more tailored we can follow up with.
Great. So I want
No, just
to.
in closing, sort of. Yep. No, just gonna just have on the screen to say, we can read these facts as in closing, as Ariel would come and close us out the final time for our series that we've been doing this year.
Thank you so much, Dale, for trudging through these 4 sessions, and we'll probably have something new to present to everyone next year. So thank you very much, Dale, for presenting, and everyone for attending today, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Speak soon.